Greetings adventurers, and welcome to Loot Goblin Marketplace. Some people are menaced no matter where they are at the game table. When they aren't power hungry behind the DM screen, they're trying to become the main character in the party. When you encounter a person like this in an otherwise perfect group, don't think that your speaking up will cause the group to collapse. More times than not, you're not the only one at the game table annoyed by this person, and it's better to communicate with them before things get out of hand and no one wants to play TTRPG again. It's been a while since we had a true Neckbeard saga on the channel, so the Ballad of Grimy is one that I've wanted to cover for a while. So let's start with part 1, The Man Who Killed 3 Campaigns. This is a tribute to the worst human being I've ever encountered in my long life of gaming. He checked all the boxes, being that guy from metagaming to creepy roleplay to deliberately trying to end real-life relationships. In addition to the weekly board game nights and running into this unpleasant person at comic shops and conventions, I played in 3 different campaigns with him, each of them ending when he did something so atrocious that it instantly killed the game. Here are the key players in our tale of horror. Me, the new guy and unwilling punching bag of our antagonist, Bro, my friend who introduced me to our game group, host the game nights, and Grimy, host, high school and college friend, and all-around piece of shit. Campaign 1, Dark Heresy. Hey, I actually got a perfect outfit for this one. Let me get changed real quick. Alright, let's jump into it. I just graduated and found a job near my college's city. Most of my friends had left by then, but Bro was still around and told me he was part of a game group. I hadn't touched a D20 in 4 years, but I was eager to get back into the game and meet some new friends while I was at it, so I asked Bro if he could snag me an invitation. Bro comes through and I get a text from Host with an address and a weekly schedule. I show up to the next session an hour early. Host told me that the group was in the middle of a Dark Heresy campaign, but the game master was willing to add one more person. I spent an hour with Host going over the ins and outs of Dark Heresy, which is a gritty and violent investigation and combat focused TTRPG set in the Warhammer 40k universe. I didn't know much about Warhammer 40k, so I thought I should play a younger character to indicate their naiveness in the world, and then I asked for a rundown of the party's composition. The entire party was playing a combat heavy class except for one, so I built my character around charisma and deception to balance the team. The party was also mostly male, so I made her female, and finally, the party was trying to escape from a prison planet, so my character was someone born on the prison planet, and I longed to see what lay outside the wall-laden planet. By the time I finished putting my character together, the rest of the players began to arrive. Grimy came last. I introduced myself to all the players and made sure to go out of my way to thank Grimy for letting me join mid-campaign. Grimy didn't seem to care too much, and I took that as a sign that he was probably stressed at the thought of incorporating a new character into his campaign. I got my character sheet approved by him and did my best to be a support role in the party. I was nervous at the time, so I avoided the limelight, making sure not to interrupt another player while they're talking, and provided a gift in the form of unhealthy snacks. And then the game got underway. At first, I was enjoying the session. My character was terrible at combat, but she had great investigation skills and could deceive anyone like it was no one's business. Grimy would often hint plot hooks or clues to mysteries, which I wrote down and then encouraged the party to go after. My character was meek but resourceful and generally liked among everyone, except for Grimy. It happened slowly, so I didn't quite catch it right away. In combat, enemies would prioritize me, despite having 2 heavily armored characters standing without cover, firing rocket launchers, a ninja running into melee range with a power sword, and an elite sniper in the back. If I did not spend my first round in combat jumping into cover, Grimy would always have several mooks target me. Sometimes enemies got the jump on us, and I was taken out instantly, but always saved by one of my teammates. Then my deception tactics became more challenging. Grimy originally had me roll deception whenever I made a cover story, but soon I had to roll deception for every lie I told in that cover story, and one failed roll would ruin the entire attempt to solve things non-violently. Sometimes I'd fail even when passing all my rolls. At one point, I dressed up like a scientist and secretly led my party through a bunch of laboratories, distracting guards and unlocking doors as I went ahead of them. One of our frontline heavies sees a dangerous-looking guard and tries to one-shot him before he's aware of the party's presence. The shot misses but alerts every guard in the room, and they all open fire on me. According to Grimy, the guards assumed that I was with the band of heavily armed mercs despite being in disguise and being across the room from them. So I went down again. My party finished the fight and I was brought to medbay, where at this point I was a regular customer. You know, as a dungeon master, I can understand sometimes that it's frustrating when the charisma guy is completely mitigating your whole encounter when you really want to have a cool fight set up. You just have to find situations where if the party's having fun with the espionage, if they're having fun with, sneaking around, eventually you will have an encounter that will be perfect. And that missed sneak attack shot is the perfect opportunity to say, oh, finally, I get to spring all the stuff I've been waiting on in this map, but specifically targeting the person who went through, was properly disguised, clearly succeeded on some checks. That's where the DM, you can't be metagaming for your NPCs. And this is something that a DM can make mistake with too. Sometimes you metagame by accident and you forget that the person is supposed to be disguised, so you target him. But obviously that's not the case as we read further into the story, so let's just jump right into it. Another fun story was when our party had to investigate a merchant who may have been selling heretical items. I disguised myself as a noble and used my connections to get me fake IDs and spread rumors that a noble was looking to purchase goods on the black market and showed up with one of the other PCs as my hired muscle. Grimy says that my muscle is too suspicious and forces me to roll a very challenging persuasion roll to let my muscle with me. Miraculously I made it, but Grimy was huffed about it, saying that the merchant's guards are on high alert and will shoot me if either I or my muscle do anything suspicious. A few more deception rolls and the merchant reveals a necklace which he claims is an unholy artifact. I ask how he can prove that item is an unholy artifact, and the merchant puts that necklace on my character. No rolls, no role playing, no way to avoid this. I tell Grimy that there's no way my character would let someone put a cursed item anywhere near her, and Grimy just cackles and says, "You wanted to know if the necklace was unholy." My character suffers a permanent debuff, no way to remove it. I was pissed. I never knew why Grimy hated my character so much, although later I realized it wasn't my character he hated, but the player. He would talk over me when we were hanging out outside the game, criticize my taste in comics, movies, or TV shows, and would usually dismiss any points I'd make while having a conversation. All of this eventually boiled into the one act that completely destroyed his campaign. This isn't a DM who's annoyed with specifically the build of this character. This is a person who wants to, for some reason, punish them, and since they're a DM, they have full control of the game, and since they can't mess with them in real life, they're just going to keep messing with them in game until this boils over. So let's see what the final straw for this campaign was. A mob boss had been connected to recent cult activity, and we had been given permission to bring him in. Problem was that he never left his well-guarded mansion and did not invite strangers. Me and our sniper had the highest stealth stats, so we paired up to explore the enemy grounds in order to scout for possible entry methods. Grimy has us roll stealth every single time we do anything. Walk down the hallway, roll stealth. Peek around the corner, roll stealth. Whisper to your party member an inch from your face, roll stealth. Grimy got more impatient with every successful roll we made, but our luck eventually ran out and one of us failed our stealth roll. Every guard instantly surrounded us, they just materialized behind every corner, popped out of every door. Grimy made it pretty evident that me and Sniper were dead if we so much as blinked. I thought, okay, so now the party gets to plan a daring rescue. That's cool, but I was wrong. So very wrong. First, Sniper got interrogated. Grimy would scream questions at Sniper player, and Sniper player rolled to resist blurting information. At one point, Grimy had a guard throw a punch at Sniper, dealing a bit of damage. Overall, I thought it was dark but fitting Dark Heresy. Then came my turn, and here's where things got messed up. Grimy decided that regular interrogation was too good for my character. The enemy guards were going to... Alright, so I know this is an interrogation, I know this is Dark Heresy, but let's put it this way. This is not the kind of torture that I feel like should be acceptable at any table. It's a torture of an adult nature. We'll just leave it at that. The rolls that the player character makes here doesn't matter. Things get more and more heinous. It ends with Grimy proudly declaring that their will has been broken. I don't know how you ever set foot at a table with this guy again. Let's see how the rest of the table responds. Our only female player gets out of her seat, packs her things, and leaves without saying a word. She never plays a game with Grimy again. I'm in utter shock, as were most of the other players. No one said good game. No one even wanted to acknowledge that we'd have a session next week. The only person who looked like they were having a good time was Grimy, who was nudging host while shoveling his game books into his backpack saying, "Nice finisher, right?" Really sets up the dystopian feel of 40k. Host kind of just blankly agrees, not wanting to say anything. I show up to host's house next week and we're all playing board games instead. No one wants to play Dark Heresy anymore. Host says that he has a campaign in mind and wants me to come. I think, thank God, as long as Grimy isn't the DM, I'm safe. I was so very wrong. I don't know what kind of games of 40k this man is playing, but someone definitely needs to check his hard drive, and the only winner here really is the girl who up and leaves and isn't a part of the next two parts. A person like Grimy, it doesn't matter if they're the game master, they're gonna find a way to make your setting awful, and it's no surprise that they blow up the following two campaigns. Campaign 2, The Deadlands. Folks tend to ask, why did you keep playing, and why didn't anyone kick Grimy from the group? The answer is a bit tragic and is tied to Grimy and Host's relationship. Host was the only person in our group who had a home big enough to fit our group, and save for Grimy, the group itself is great, but Grimy and Host go way back. Host is a nice guy, but his self-esteem is shit, and tries to please everyone. Grimy naturally latched onto Host for years, bullying him into a subservient friendship position. Grimy convinced Host that he was the only true friend he'd ever have, and that meant Host included Grimy for all his nerdy activities. I appreciate this explanation so early into the second story, so I can talk about it here. This seems to be sadly an all too common theme when it comes to tables dealing with a recurring awful person. Usually there's one or two people where they have a prior established relationship with, and you feel like you're going to lose all of them if you cut out the problem player. But the truth is, I'm sure Host is great in your eyes, but if you made it a situation where you're like, hey, we're really uncomfortable, we don't want to play this here, if Grimy's going to act that way, and Host says, I have to side with Grimy, well, unfortunately, you just need to make a listing for 2 new players. And if you have to find a new venue, you have to find a local card shop, you have to find a library where you can rent out a room. Yeah, it sucks, but you know it sucks a little bit more? Dealing with Grimy, even though his friend's kind of cool. And that's just the takeaway I hope you guys always have in stories like these that keep going on, and you wonder why. But anyways, let's get back to the Deadlands campaign. A few weeks after the horrific Dark Heresy campaign, Host announced that he wanted to GM a Deadlands campaign. I've never heard of Deadlands before, but Host described it as a supernatural TV show, but set in the Wild West. I was sold. Session 0 came in, and as per my normal character creation strategy, I asked what everyone was playing. Of course, Grimy had to keep his character secret, but everyone had casually mentioned that they were making gunslingers and melee-focused characters, so I went for a spellcaster class, the Mad Scientist. I wanted to make a super quirky character and did so, in spades, by taking hindrances. Hindrances are like feats in D&D, except they are universally bad, but taking hindrances allows you to take actual feats or increase your base stats. I maxed out my hindrances and used them to bump up my stats, so I was pretty good at everything but amazing at my magic skills. This helped me deal with bullshit combat scenarios that frequently came up. We wrapped up Session 0 by going around the group, giving a quick summary of our characters. One guy was a zombie gunslinger, another was a shape-shifting Native American, one person was a Men in Black style secret agent. Cool stuff. Grimy ironically had the most interesting character, a rich heiress with high charisma who was a huckster, a spellcaster who uses gambling to cast spells. His character was motivated to track down her husband's killer. I called out the Grimy, complimenting his cool character, to which he huffed and said, all my characters are amazing. I don't have trouble making original OP characters like some players. Not sure if that jab had been directed at me, Host, or another player, but I let it slide. I introduced my Mad Scientist as a fun backstory hook. I said my scientist introduces himself as a doctor, but in reality he was a college dropout since he felt college was a waste of time. I figured that would be fun if he'd run into other mad scientists or even former classmates of his. Session 1, all of us are in Connecticut boarding a train to head out west for a science conference in San Francisco. Host sets up these scenarios where each of our characters bump into each other and get a chance to roleplay an introduction. Finally, the RP scene between me and Grimy came up. Host sets up the scene. Grimy, as you're waiting to board the train, one of the crew members runs up to you with a concern related to your luggage. As he leads you to the luggage loading zone, he points out that your luggage is too bulky to load with the rest. OP, you'll see this happening as you're walking down to the train. This is perfect, I think to myself. I have spells that could help move heavy objects. My scientist saunters to Grimy's heiress and the crew member. Excuse me, madam. I couldn't help but overhear your dilemma. Could I be of assistance? Grimy got really pissy, turning to me and then immediately back to the host. I do not know who this riffraff is, but I don't want him anywhere near my things. In fact, I want to buy his room on the train and use it for storage. Now, Grimy had taken 2 feats for his character, wealth and charisma. Both meant he would win just about any social situation, and the crew member said, let me speak to my boss. My scientist awkwardly introduces himself and tries to convince Grimy that I could help solve the luggage issue. As if, you don't look like a doctor, you look like a charlatan. I have my eye on you. At this point, Grimy writes some notes down and passes them to the host. Host reads them, looks concerned at Grimy, and then shrugs and says, okay. The crew members returns with the supervisor, and the supervisor agrees to let Grimy have my character's room for storage. The supervisor then turns to my character, apologizes, and hands me an upgrade to a personal suite on the train. Grimy is not happy to hear this. What the hell, host? How come OP gets a free suite? Host tells Grimy that people cannot just spend money to kick someone out of a train. Upgrading passengers that are being inconvenienced is normal. Grimy just continues to yell at Host, demanding that my character was not allowed to go on the train, suggesting that I shouldn't be allowed to play in this campaign. Host sheepishly stands his ground, not out of moral justification, but out of a no way to approve of Grimey's demands without sounding like a complete lunatic. Alright, so let me get this straight. I know that Grimey doesn't like the player that's writing this story, but again, he opts to be passive-aggressive and do stuff in-game. His endgame, I guess, here is if he can convince the DM to not let them on the train, then canonically it makes no sense for this player character to be part of the game. And while that might work to force the player to re-roll a character, I guess, it's insane to think that he can bully the guy in-game to the point where he just leaves out of game. So this is why communication is very important. If Grimey keeps this argument within the game, you're never going to solve it because he's always going to roll another character, he's going to optimize, he's going to try to metagame, he's going to do the dumbest stuff in game to just make passive jabs at you over and over again because he doesn't like this person in real life. And until it's actually hashed out why, this will not get better. Grimey was so out of shape that even an argument caused him to sweat. After finally catching his breath, he calmed down and his character decided to offer mine a peace offering, an apple. My character thanks Grimey and then tosses the apple behind his head. Grimey starts breathing deep again. He took a massive inhale and then screamed, "You metagaming piece of shit!" Everyone on the table jumped back when he said that. Grimey began ranting at me that there's no way my character would know that Grimey had drugged the apples. Wait, hold on, was the entire table's reaction. Grimey showed Host his character sheet and said that his heiress always carried drugged apples as part of her backstory. And the only way OP's character would know this is if he was metagaming. Now, I had not known about Grimey's poison apples, but I handed Host my own character sheet and pointed at a section of the sheet where players can input personality qualities. One such quality was irrational fears, and I had listed apples as a fear. I said that my character thought there was a special meaning to the phrase "an apple a day keeps the doctor away" and therefore distrusted all apples. The group got a chuckle out of my explanation and Grimey relented his point. No apologies, just a grumpy acknowledgement that we can now proceed to the actual story. Dude, that's straight up a dad joke, and I think it just saved your character's life. That's hilarious. Grimey made sure to make my gameplay experience as miserable as possible. To start, that note he passed to the GM was that Grimey wanted to hire a private investigator to do a background check of my scientist. Grimey had no other reason than he wanted an in-game justification for why his heiress knows my scientist's backstory. What was supposed to be a fun side plot hook became a reason for Grimey to ridicule me during every RP session. I'd be blending in with other scientists, trying to RP some info out of them, and here comes Grimey loudly proclaiming that my scientist was a fraud, and that he was a college dropout. I'd make up credentials to get our party into a lab, and Grimey shoves me to the side and tells the guards how I'm not supposed to be there because her private eye dug up the truth about me. Every time I try to roleplay, Grimey would interrupt the scene, acting smug and obnoxiously divulging my character's backstory. The combat was arguably worse. My mad scientist was mostly a support caster, but Grimey went full-on damage dealer, focusing on area effect spells. Grimey would always cast spells in such a way that it would always catch my scientist in the crossfire. Grimey would sometimes move his heiress specifically so that her attack would hit me as well. Fortunately, I was a smart player, I had a lot of defensive spells, and my chunkier base stats allowed me to tank Grimey's bullshit. Host also took note and made sure the enemies didn't target me since I was already battling Grimey. Whenever it was the enemy's turn, Grimey would remind Host that OP hadn't been attacked in a while, and Host would nervously point out that my scientist hadn't attacked the bad guys, only provide buffs for my allies. This broke out into argument at every combat encounter. I don't know how you guys keep putting up with this, and since Grimey likes in-game solutions so much, you as the party could just come together and say, hey, this heiress is a liability, we're canning her. And if she wants to argue that, hey, I should still be in here, well, any person that isn't a good fit for the party is supposed to get re-rolled at the game table, you know, because for in-game reasons, that person doesn't fit anymore. But again, back to the story. Things came to an ugly head during our first major boss battle. Grimey killed a rogue man scientist, which caused his latest creation, a 12-foot tall steampunk mech, to come alive. Grimey rolled really well, but Host said it's a robot, it only does what it's programmed to do, and it's programmed to rampage. Grimey got so pissed off he refused to help in the battle, spending each of his actions trying to persuade the robot to kill my character or badmouth the other players for teaming up with an evil mad scientist such as myself. Why are you still in the party, dude? Our party manages to defeat the mech without Grimey's help, but the mech is now set to self-destruct and we have X turns to get far enough away before it explodes. Host sets up a riveting chase sequence in which we have to escape from a laboratory labyrinth, getting past robotic guards and locked doors. Grimey decides that it would be a good use of his time to stand behind every locked locked door and slam it in my face whenever I try to go through, locking it behind him. As a mad scientist, dismantling locks on a door isn't that difficult, but it eats up time. But I had something Grimy didn't have, a friend. Bro was sick and tired of Grimy's bullshit and followed Grimy everywhere his heiress went. Every time Grimy tried to delay my character, Bro's 6-foot-tall Native American would drag her away, giving me plenty of time to escape. Unsurprisingly, Grimy was not happy that my scientist survived the boss fight and the explosion, at which point his character proclaims, "I'm going to continue my quest for my husband's killer by heading east." Now, the host has done a pretty solid job of defining everyone's plot hooks being in the west, literally railroading us by taking a train heading west. But like a stuck-up brat, Grimy wanted to travel east. Host then describes how an eerie man in black manifests in front of them, tells Grimy that he killed the husband, and the man in black will wait for Grimy in San Francisco before mysteriously vanishing in black smoke. Even with this Deus Ex Machina, Grimy whined that he wanted to go east and refused to travel with these lunatics. Out of character, Grimy also berated Host, demanding that everyone else make new characters to fit his character's insane plot twist. We'd been playing this campaign for months, and you could see that after each session, Host's passion had slowly been drained. This was the last straw. All his story threads for our characters, all of the plot development, none of it mattered to him anymore. He just shut his books and said, "That boss fight was probably as good as it'll get. Let's play something else." It was heartbreaking. The next few weeks were spent playing board games. During one such day, Bro gets me alone and says he wants to run his campaign. I asked if Grimy was invited, and Bro said that he talked to Host, and where Host plays, Grimy plays. I shuddered, but Bro put his hand on my shoulder and told me, "I got you." Bro had his work cut out for him, and he definitely gave Grimy a taste of his own medicine. Wow, I can't believe Grimy tried to do what I said the rest of the party should do, where he's like, "I'm going east, you all have to reroll characters to stay with the party." But dude, Grimy, you're not the party, you're one guy. It makes so much more sense for the party to have you reroll than the other way around, but of course, they're such like a self-centered individual where they truly believe that everyone should do what they want, and since he can only solve things with in-game solutions, he feels like he can strong-arm the host again. I'm kind of sad this is the final straw for that campaign, because it's not so much that Host, stands up for himself, he just gives up and he just lets it be everyone else's problem too. Instead of saying, "No, if you're going to play in this game, we're re-rolling you and moving on because I have all this fun stuff planned and only you want to get in the way of it." I don't care how good his bro is at DMing, he can come up with the perfect solutions, he can have the perfect counters to that guy's character, he can make sure all the checks go against this guy. Grimy, if he's not going to get his way in-game, he's just going to blow up, I'm sure. But we'll be able to find that out for sure in this third story. And now we have an interlude. This is a short story of Grimy's shittiness that is unrelated to his campaign serial killings. Over the past year in secret, Host has began a long-distance relationship with a woman he met online. After the abrupt end of his campaign, he disappeared for a few weeks. We had all thought it was due to him being depressed and about his poor campaign. But when we returned, we were all surprised to find out that Host got married and spent the last few weeks having his new wife move in. Host's wife was not a nerd, but she did wonders for our weekly group sessions. Host's house became spotless, Host began organizing his games, comics, and other nerdy gear, and we always had freshly made and healthy snacks for our game nights. Host's wife also put a stop to Host's poor eating habits, and the switch from daily junk food to home-cooked meals showed. Host looked healthier, thinner, and most importantly, happy, so of course Grimy didn't want any of this. Oh, come on, man. Grimy told the group when Host wasn't around how much he hated Host's wife. He said Host's wife was rude to everyone, disrespected us with healthy snacks, and was changing Host into something he's not. In shape? Most of the group ignored Grimy, with other reaffirming that Host's wife was only rude to Grimy because Grimy was rude to her. Grimy doesn't need to eat the healthy snacks, and Host is both in the best shape of his life and the happiest he's ever been. Grimy would always raise his voice when you pointed out the flaws in his argument until it would attract the attention of Host or Host's wife, at which point he'd shut up and murmur to himself. Grimy's next plan was to attack Host's newly acquired self-confidence. I came early one game night and found Grimy huddled up next to Host, telling him to divorce his wife. It was like some bad sitcom. She's taking away your freedom. She doesn't understand you. She's using you for your house and money despite her making more money. Maybe it was all the years of abuse finally hitting Host, or maybe it was the Deadlands campaign that was the last straw, or maybe Host's wife was just that good for his mentality. But Host, in the first time since I've known him, stood up to Grimy and told him to leave his wife alone. Times are changing, and it was the first step to the end of Grimy's reign. That really wasn't the twist of fate I was expecting going into this third campaign, but honestly I'll take it. Good for host. Campaign 3, A Song of Ice and Fire. Bro had gotten bit by the Game of Thrones bug hard and lost it when he learned that there was a Song of Ice and Fire TTRPG. He gave me a quick rundown, and I was particularly intrigued by two aspects of the system that are important for this story. First, there was two forms of combat, a traditional combat system in which you fought with weapons until a side was defeated, and a social combat in which you present arguments using social stats to sway NPCs to your way of thinking. Second, this was a setting with virtually no magic, and serious injuries could take months of in-game time to heal. The pacing of the game was supposed to be a mix of political intrigue and combat, making it one of the more unique systems I've ever run across. As per my normal character creation habit, I asked our players what type of builds they were making. Grimy, as before, refused to divulge anything about his character, but everyone else was running either a pure combat or combat/social hybrid character. I rolled up a master, which for those unaware is a scholar considered highly prized in any kingdom for their wealth of information. I focused on healing knowledge, which allowed me to reduce in-game healing times by more than half, and put all my remaining points in social encounters as I felt scholar would be out of place on a battlefield. Grimy, once session 1 began, revealed a pure combat archer with a 10-page backstory. Bro, having seen Grimy's bullshit before, read over the entire backstory, which Grimy refused to show until session 1. Bro flat out refused, saying that no, you cannot be the head of the army and have a loyalty of the Lord's military over the Lord himself. Grimy had been more agitated since host got married and showed that agitation by slamming his ham-sized fist into the wooden table in hopes to appear more threatening. Bro treated Grimy as a child he was and told him he would be a sergeant-at-arms and have a small platoon of soldiers. Grimy continued pounding on the table, but Bro's ruling was final and he relented. The session finally began and Bro laid out our first mission. A neighboring baron and ally to our lord had been suffering from bandits hiding in their forests, preventing merchants and traders from getting through and slowly dwindling their supplies. It was left to our group on how we could aid the baron. I suggested sending supplies to the baron, but accompanied by some soldiers disguised as traders. If the supplies are ambushed by bandits, then we'd be able to counter-ambush them. The party was in agreement, but Grimy didn't like the plan, mostly because he didn't come up with it. Grimy wanted to go to our neighboring allies and burn their force down to flush out the bandits, then bring the full force of the military against them. While this plan seemed insane, Bro thought it would be an excellent time to test out the social combat system. Our lord requested me and Grimy's presence in his throne room, each of us standing before him to present our arguments. Grimy goes first, preaching that might is right and force yields results. My master presented the facts that burning an ally's forest while marching in with the full force of our military might be seen as an act of aggression. Yeah, that's an understatement. That would leave our castle vulnerable. With my focus in social combat, I easily outrode Grimy's argument, which led to Grimy declaring to Bro, I'd challenge OP to one-on-one combat. And before Bro could say anything, Grimy described charging at my character with a sword and skewering him. Grimy rolls his dice and says, I hit and you take 11 damage. Bro shuts Grimy down, saying that before any of that happens, two of the Lord's guards tackle Grimy to the ground. Grimy slams his fist into the table again, screeching how his dice rolls were high. Bro facepalms and informs Grimy, you were called to the Lord for a discussion. You took out your weapon in front of the Lord, which is already grounds for being attacked, and then you unprovokingly charged at his master. The Lord has no reason to believe your plan would succeed now, and you'll be stripped of your rank if you continue this behavior. Bro was cool like that. Grimy was so pissed that he declared that we were done for tonight, packed his things, and left. After he was gone, Bro told everyone that he was still down to run the session, and we did some RPing and finalized our mission plans. Guys, see how easy that is? Just lock the door when he leaves. Don't let him back. Don't let him back. And they let him back. Session 2 rolled around. Grimy was furious that the group had the audacity to play without him after he left and refused to listen to our plan. We had 2 carts full of supplies and an armed platoon disguised as merchants, including Grimy's fellow soldiers. Grimy refused to dress up as a merchant and ordered his soldiers to do the same. As we head off, Bro explained that your group will need a scout to plan the route and avoid ambushes. Grimy volunteered and the group agreed as his scouting stats were high. Grimy manages to do a decent job rerouting our carts away from damaged roads and bad weather. Then Grimy found the first bandit hiding as a lookout. When he came back to report to our group, he didn't mention it. Out of character, everyone was asking why Grimy wasn't warning about the bandit, and Grimy smugly exclaims, it's what my character would do, and don't think about metagaming this. Our group is inevitably ambushed, but we managed to drive the bandits back. Most of the group took damage as they fought, but me being a non-combat role, I hid under the cart. This pissed off Grimy, who was berating my master for being a coward as I was patching up our party and NPCs post-battle. When I offered to assist Grimy, who had taken some damage, he called me a fake master and said that he could bandage himself off better than any quack could. Grimy failed his medicine check and now suffered a movement speed penalty until he got proper medical treatment. One of our NPCs volunteered to help Grimy with the scouting, saying that 2 scouts would more likely find a hidden ambush. But Grimy huffed, telling Bro not to do his job. Grimy continued to solo scout, but I asked the NPC scout to go ahead and scout anyway. Grimy yelled at Bro, telling him that he had no point in the group now, to which Bro responded with, maybe if you did your job and warned people of ambushes, your reputation among the NPCs would be stronger. Grimy slammed the table again, but Bro simply stared down Grimy like a parent who was about to spank their child. Eventually, our NPC scout reported a larger group of bandits, readying to ambush. Host orders our stealthiest NPCs and PCs to sneak past the bandits and hide. When the bandits would attack, they'd ambush the bandits and pincer them from behind. A solid plan. Grimy was part of the stealth party and hid himself in a tree. Right as he was getting into position, Grimy says he impersonates one of the bandits' voices and yells that there is a master in the back cart who'd be worth a king's ransom. This ruined our surprise round, which resulted in the bandits notching an arrow and firing first into Grimy. Grimy turned red, cursing our bro as a metagaming asshole playing favorites. Bro told Grimy that you can't pretend to be a bandit, you don't know what any of them sound like. All you did was give away your position, now make a dex check to prevent yourself from falling out of the tree. Grimy rolled poorly, and the damage of falling out of the tree combined with the 2 other injuries made him unconscious. Grimy continued to smack the table with his fist, then declared he needed some fresh air, and stepped outside to cool off. With Grimy out of the picture, the rest of the party had a challenging battle. Even my master had to draw a knife at some point when our backline was overwhelmed, resulting in me getting a gnarly stab wound. Grimy returned as we wrapped up the fight. One of the PCs searched the bodies and covered a coded message with the emblem of a neighboring country, giving us our first major story hook. I patched myself and all the other injured PCs and NPCs as one of Grimy's soldiers dragged his unconscious body to me. Let it never be said that I metagame or hold a grudge, as I rushed over to Grimy's character knowing full well I could have ignored him. I patched him up, made some recovery drugs with wild plants, and got him conscious again. Grimy smiles and says he pulls out a dagger and stabs my character. Bro demands Grimy give a non-bullshit reason why he'd attack his own medic. Grimy argues that he was in battle mode before falling out of the tree, and his soldier instincts would keep him in fight mode even as he was coming around. Bro glanced in my direction, I shrugged my shoulders, and Grimy was allowed to make his attack. It hits, and now the group's only medic is unconscious. Grimy glares at me with a shit-eating grin, and then volunteers to scout ahead. This time, Grimy actually warns the group of ambushes, which we avoid. We reach our destination, the Baron's castle. Half the party, including Grimy, needed extreme medical attention. We were put up in the Baron's private medical wing, where I eventually regained consciousness and began patching myself up faster than the Baron's doctors and nurses could believe. Host had already convinced the Baron that we were here to help, and with a generous introduction, I was given temporary control over the Baron's medical staff. Before this exchange, Grimy had been a model patient, wanting to get back to full health as soon as possible, but when the news of my temporary promotion got to the medical wing, Grimy refused any further treatment. He lashed at the nurses, doctors, and anyone else working under a lying master who will betray the Baron. Grimy's low diplomacy scores meant that no one believed him, resulting in him getting out of bed and attacking my character whenever I tried to help him. That's when I got a clever idea and passed Bro a note. Bro looks at it, smiles, and continues roleplaying. Next time we went to Grimy's perspective, Bro describes a meal prepared for him, which Grimy then eats. Bro asks Grimy to make a constitution save, and being injured, Grimy gets massive penalties to the save, failing it. Your head feels heavy as the poppy hidden in your meal begins to numb your body and fill you with pleasant dreams. Yes, I ordered the nurses to drug Grimy's food as he was clearly delirious with fever. Grimy shrieked, giving us a poor Donkey Kong impersonation as he alternated slamming his left and right fists into the table. His hands were actually swollen by the end of this fit. Poor table, by the way. Which only pissed Grimy off more because out of character, I offered to fetch him the first aid kit. In character, I rolled extremely well to heal Grimy up. Fast forward a few sessions, our party is making progress piecing together a mystery regarding a rival lord who was seeking to cut off our lord's allies as part of a plan to take over our lands. Grimy had zero contribution to our progress as he couldn't leave his bed. Instead, Grimy began writing page-long notes and passing them to Bro. Bro read them all, and during one of our RP sessions described this scene. As you're discussing your recent discovery, one of the nurses OP recognizes approaches him asking for a private audience. The nurse explains that Grimy had been handing her letters in secret demanding that they be sent to your lord without the party's knowledge. But due to his temperament, the nurse thought it would be best if OP saw them first. Bro passed me the notes, which were just pages of nonsense that could be summed up to your master's drugging me as proof of his inevitable betrayal. I described Master thanking the nurse. When she leaves the room, I tear up the notes, which I then mimic in real life. And that was it. The last straw that broke Grimy. The entire party was having a blast in Bro's campaign, half of which was just enjoying Grimy's freakouts. Grimy in character had lost all his standing, losing the respect of his men, and the favor of his lord for his out-of-character behavior. Bro, unlike any other GM, had given Grimy consequences for his actions, and Grimy couldn't compute. He tore up his character sheet and tossed it in Bro's face. He turned to Host and demanded to end this campaign, to which Host had grown some form of backbone, responded that it was Bro's decision when the campaign ended. Grimy would have screamed, but his voice had become a sore mess. He was sweating profusely, and his fist had become swollen and darker from pounding on the table. He sloppily threw all of his things into a bag, flipped me off, Host and Bro, and then slammed the door as he left. We were silent for a minute before Bro, with a look of satisfaction, said, "I'm ending the campaign here. I will never be able to top that climax." Epilogue. After the session ended, Grimy stopped coming to the board game night and instead ran a new campaign, making sure to tell me in my face I was not invited to play. I couldn't care less, and Host told me that said campaign only went for 3 sessions before Grimy got frustrated and stopped running it. I learned a month later that Grimy lost his job at a comic book shop. For years, Grimy had bragged that he was a superior nerd because he got an employee discount on comics and game books. I had visited the shop and it was actually pretty nice, but checked out their Google and Yelp reviews and it was listed as a 2-star establishment, with negative reviews from parents and women mentioning one employee who was rude, insulting my taste in comics and games, and demanding that I buy things based on his recommendation. After Grimy lost his job, he completely dropped in the group and even Host stopped mentioning him. So that's the story of Grimy. He is the ultimate lesson in why shitty people sometimes get away with being shitty. But he is also the hope that karma does exist, and for that, I will always thank Grimy for entering and leaving my life. Grimy always felt like he had one person in his corner, because no matter what he did, Host would be like, yeah, you know, that's Grimy, you know, he's a good friend of mine. And with that gone, he truly lost it. He lost control of in-game, he lost control of out-of-game, and then apparently, you know, things are going bad in his real life too, which I feel like is always a factor in these RPG horror stories. Someone who's truly this insufferable at the table and has out-of-game grudges probably is like that in their day-to-day life. And honestly, if he's struggling for so much control in-game and is so furiously angry and it seems disproportional, it's probably because he's losing control of his real life too. And now he's frustrated that even in the pretend game, he can't have his way. It's not an excuse for that kind of behavior, obviously, but it could be a context of why it accelerated or spiraled so badly towards the end there. That being said, I do congratulate you guys on surviving one of the hardest boss battles in RPG horror stories. I don't know how much XP you get for surviving this encounter, but I hope you guys are just grateful and are enjoying future campaigns with this group. I don't know how many people Grimy probably turned off of his campaigns, or maybe even the hobby in general. So whenever you guys hear these stories, don't think that every campaign has a Grimy. It's few and far between, and it's stories like these that are very rare but very important to cover. Thank you guys for stopping by. This is a much longer video than usual, and thank you Twisted Pint Tavern as always for editing these ones. I feel like it's important to cover a lot of these ballad style stories because what will happen is there's a couple red flags earlier. There's something that should probably be a point of no return for the party and they still come back for more and more punishment. And just being able to showcase that things don't get better until you actually start fighting back against it. There's the saying that no D&D is better than bad D&D, and that's true clearly here for Dark Heresy, Badlands. It's not unique to D&D. It's true for any TTRPG, and I understand the mistake of saying, hey, I have these great friends, I have this great narrative in my head, I want my character to be built, and if we, destroy this campaign because maybe the DM's a problem and he quits, or enough of the party's gonna quit to the point where we have to kind of reset everything, I don't want to lose all this progress. Trust me when I say you'll have an opportunity to create any character you want several times over, and every time you have them in a new campaign, it's going to feel a little different and you can improve upon it. So don't feel like that character is dead forever. Don't feel like that time was wasted. You'll be able to have fun in a future campaign in a much better scenario that will go much longer. So just keep that in mind for your next session. I hope to see you in the next video. It was great having you guys here. You can like and subscribe, support the channel any way you can, and I'm always grateful for you guys to be here. Farewell for now.